Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers and sisters, welcome to Ramadan Unlocked. If this is the first time you're joining our show, this is a special Ramadan program every Saturdays at 6 o'clock where we discuss Ramadan life, spirituality and community issues. And it's hosted by myself, Junaid Ahmed, and Shaykh Shafiur Rahman, my co-host, as well as resident Shaykh Shafiur. So he also participates in the discussion and contributes to the questions that we receive. But each week we are joined by a very special guest. And this week I'm absolutely delighted that we have Imam Suhaib Webb, who's normally based in New York, but currently he's in DC in the States. He's given us his time to join us live from there. And we're absolutely delighted. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh, for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Just a quick introduction to Imam Suhaib Webb. He's the founder of SWIS, Suhaib Webb Institute for Sacred Sciences. He's an American Muslim scholar, graduate of Al-Azhar University. Alhamdulillah, he's also memorized the Quran. He's been active in the field of da'wah for over 2 decades, serving the Muslim community in the West. I remember first attending his lecture in 2000 in Birmingham, UK. I don't know if the Sheikh remembers. It was a big conference that was organized at that time. And alhamdulillah, the Sheikh was there giving the speech. But I was also fortunate enough to be Imam Suhaib Webb's neighbor in Egypt in 2004, 2005, when he was studying at Al-Azhar, and I was spending some time there as well. So really fortunate to have him with us. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh, for taking your time. The primary theme for today's session will be around Quran, how to engage with the Quran, as this is the month of Quran. But in Ramadan Unlocked, the show is open, where we discuss all matters around Ramadan life, spirituality, community affairs. So if you have any questions that you would like to pose to Imam Suhaib Webb, please write your questions in the comment section, and we'll try and take as many questions as possible. But maybe just to start us off, Imam Suhaib Webb, how's Ramadan been for you under lockdown? And what has been the challenges? What have you been missing the most? And maybe what have been some of the positives during this lockdown?
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Rasulillah, ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Jazakallah khair, Junaid and Shaykh Shafiur, mashallah, for hosting me. And it has been almost 20 years. You said 2 decades, subhanallah. Yeah. So I would say that, Ramadan in New York is very, very similar to almost like Ramadan in Cairo or the Muslim world, just because you have so many Muslims in New York City. If you go to the borough, like Manhattan, but if you go to like Harlem, in iftar time, the Senegali community actually rolls out carpets on the sidewalks. So just like, you just feel like you're back in the Muslim country. The same in Bay Ridge with the Arabs, Queens. You have a huge East London Bengali community in Queens. So you miss the kind of the communal feeling. And then at the ICNU, while you are work under Imam Khalil Latif, I think every night for iftar is like 600, 800 people. So that communal experience is definitely missed. And then I think the best kind of a positive out of all this is that my entire family has formed like a social bubble. So like we're all in our own city, we're all quarantined except for yourself. So I think we've been able to create better relationships with one another, to bring about family relationships. I think there's a lot of benefit in that. And I think the third is, as even Allah says, مَا نَفَعَ الْقَلْبَ شَيْءٌ مِثْلَ عُزْلَةٍ يَدْخُلُ فِيهَا مَيْدَانُ الْفِكْرَةِ. That we believe in like interval, they have interval training now, right? We believe in interval isolation. We don't believe in like long periods of extended isolation, but interval isolation. So he says, مَا نَفَعَ الْقَلْبَ شَيْءٌ مثل عزلة يدخل فيها ميدان الفكر. That nothing is better for the heart than a little isolation. So, the myth of human resilience has been exposed. The need for other people has been exposed. And then, it's a time of introspection. And even Hajar actually wrote, like 4 or 5 benefits to quarantine. You talk about it later.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what those are from Ibn Hajar's perspective. Jazakallah khairan, Imam Suhaib. So just to maybe initially start off some discussion around the primary theme for the discussion today, which is around Quran. What's your advice to general Muslim in this blessed month of Ramadan who are trying to engage with the Quran? What would you be advising them in terms of their approach, methodology to studying the Quran?
That's a great question. Imam Shatibi in Hifz al-Amani, his poem, he says, وَبَعْدْ فَحَبْلُ اللَّهِ فِينَا كِتَابُهُ فَجَاهِدْ بِهِ هِبْلَ الْإِدَى مُتَحَبِّلًا. He said that the Quran is the rope of Allah to the community, and you have to make jihad with the Quran. And Allah says it in the Quran, وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. That you have to literally engage the Quran in a way like you're struggling to engage it. You're engaged in mujahada because it demands work. So I think the first thing, and Imam al-Qasimi, the great Syrian scholar of hadith and tafsir, he said around 100 years ago, the danger of the ummah is that the ummah restricts the Quran simply to like barakah. Just read it for barakah. Read it for barakah. But first goal is
you're going to just mute your side whilst you kind of set your... Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Okay,
like,
sorry, carry on.
Small earthquake over there or something.
Yeah. Apologies.
He said the danger of regulating the Quran simply to barakah. That's the barakah is the outcome. And our brother Fadl Suleiman, he has a really good YouTube series on Tadabbur al-Quran. Thinking on the Quran. So I think the first is that you have to really be ready to work hard. Number 2 is Ustaz Khurram Marad, Allah yarhamu. He kind of talked about like not everything you come across in the Quran you're going to agree with. Like people like, oh, I'm going to read the Quran and it has to like suddenly agree with everything I want. Well, then why would there be a Quran? Like the Quran has to challenge you. There has to be a moment of kind of spiritual agitation is the word I'm looking for. Right, the Quran has to agitate you, and that it ultimately leads to some kind of conviction. And I think that the last point is like I notice people in Ramadan they understandably are very focused and they have like an incredible dedication to reciting. But I encourage people around halfway through Ramadan, are you now thinking about a strategy of something that you can do consistently after the month? من يعبد رمضان فإن رمضان قد فات ومن يعبد الله فإن الله حي لا يموت. Right? Whoever worships the month of Ramadan is going to go. But if you really want to see the fruit of Ramadan is what carries over after Ramadan. So, maybe halfway through the month, you're going to have to think about, first of all, people, they say, oh, I'm going to do exactly what I did in Ramadan after Ramadan. No, you're not. It's going to be impossible, especially if the quarantine is lifted, right? But can you do half of what you did in Ramadan? Can you do a fourth of what you did in Ramadan? But then you're being consistent in your relationship with the Book of Allah throughout the year.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you say there in terms of when people are engaging with the Quran, maybe for the first time, or they're reading the full translation of the Quran, and they come across something that they feel they can't quite agree with, or it's not quite settling with them. The kind of spiritual, emotional agitation that you were referring to. How should one take this? Because this can, for some people, may be a sense of worry. How can I not be agreeing with something that is divine? And it's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is something wrong with me? So how do we navigate through that?
I mean, yeah, I think at that moment, what you want to say is like, I agree with this and I'm still working to understand it. وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. Jahid bifahmihi, like work to understand it. It's not, people tend to think of religion like takeout, right? But religion is a process. And the Sahaba, they struggled to implement certain verses of Quran over time. Not all of them immediately were able to do everything. And they believed in Allah, so we're not saying they had any doubt in their aqidah, a'udhu billah. But the practice of some of the commands and prohibitions in Quran, they struggled with. It's very normal. So give it time. Like I like to tell people, like look at religion as a process. The last verse of the 48th chapter of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the Sahaba كَزَرْعٍ أَخْرَجَ شَطَأَهُ فَآزَرَهُ. They're like a small, weak stem that grew from a seed and slowly became stronger and stronger. You know, some people said the seed is the Quran, right? So we're not going to be immediately like, you know, super strong. It's a relationship. The Quran demands a relationship. And that relationship needs time. And I actually like to tell some of my students, when you have these moments, that's the sign of a more nuanced, mature engagement with the Quran. You're not just reading it. Now you're thinking about what you're reading. And your thinking may even be wrong, but at least you're trying. How do we now then realign those thoughts? So asking teachers, right? Reading tafsir, doing research, you know, online, trying to find, you know, what have common scholars said about what this verse means, asking questions and engaging. And then seeing this as a process. You know, Imam even Taymiyyah, right? He said, like, I used to go to the mountains and make dua, Allahumma ma'alim Ibrahim alimni, you know, when I would come across a verse that I struggled to understand. I mean, this is even Taymiyyah, right? And Al-Ghazali said, there are certain ways I read the Quran. I heard this from Ustaz Khurram Murad, that, rahimahullah, that I have a way of reading the Quran that is like every 3 days I finish, every week I finish, every month I finish. Then there's another way I don't think I will finish before I die. So like he's deeply engaged in the meaning of the Quran and trying to like unravel, you know, what are the asrar of Allah fi kitabi. You know, that's not an easy thing. And we should, doesn't mean a person's a bad Muslim, doesn't mean they left Islam. It means that I am now at a more mature state in my reading where I'm actually beginning to think and engage. What does this actually mean? You know?
And maybe we don't engage enough in that area. We spend a lot of time reading or reciting the Quran and maybe reading the translation, but this point that you were referring to earlier on in terms of tadabbur al-Quran, contemplating on the Quran, pondering upon the Quran. Often we think this is the realm of the scholars. It's not something that ordinary Muslims should be engaged in. How would you advise people, ordinary Muslims, to engage in the contemplation or pondering of the Quran? Is that possible without knowing Arabic? You know, do you need to be a scholar or, you know, be familiar with a lot of Islamic knowledge for you to be able to do that?
At a practical level, the Quran has guidance for everybody, right? Inna hadha al-Quran yahdi lillati hiya aqwam. There's a difference between like fatwa and, you know, kind of scholarly conclusions about, you know, higher level issues than just daily. I think I told you guys a story of my friend. He's from East London. And after the 7/7 bombing, here's a great example that kind of encapsulates what we're trying to say here. His neighbor was actually non-Muslim, so he lived around all the awesome Bengali people, alhamdulillah. And he was, after 7/7, his non-Muslim neighbor requested a copy of the English Quran from him. So I think he went to Yahya's bookstore, I don't know, man, and he got him the English Quran. And he read it in 2 weeks, the non-Muslim guy. And so he came back to the Muslim brother and he said, yeah, I finished your book, man. I finished the Quran. And he said, really? He said, yeah, what do you think? He said, where's the second book? He said, what do you mean? He said, you people don't follow this book. People in this neighborhood, you're reading a different book. So when we're talking about now daily application of Quran, we're talking about general values, the universal values in the Quran. I don't need to be a scholar to be good to my wife, right? I tell people, like, do you really need to take a class on how to be a good person? Like, I mean, I get it, but like, really, like, it's in the Quran, how to be a good person. It's in the Quran, right? Do you really need to take a class on like how to smile at your neighbor? Like, I feel sometimes the way we speak to the Muslim community, like we're speaking to people that we think are completely uneducated. Like, you know, I teach my child how to be nice to the neighbor. I don't teach a grown person. So the Quran, I remind grown people how to be good. The Quran in that way, and that's why Al-Razi, we can ask Shaykh Suhaib Saeed if Razi actually said this, but It's attributed to Razi that he said the majority of the Quran can be understood by everybody. Right? It's just, if Allah only sent the Quran for ulama, how would Islam have spread across the globe to so many different types of people? So, you know, I think that's very important. The Tadabbur al-Quran is a fard ain on every person.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair. If I could bring Shaykh Shafi in on this as a kind of general point in terms of your advice to the Muslims in terms of engaging with the Quran in this month of Ramadan.
Yeah, I think, alhamdulillah, just to add on what Shaykh Suhaib was saying, it's definitely a lifelong experience. It's definitely it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. People have to take it in stages. People have to be aware of their own selves as well, their own capacities. But definitely, the Quran is something that everybody can understand at a basic level. That's there. So access the Quran through translation, through easy tafsirs, through classes and things like that. Even just to give you an example, people access the Quran in different ways in different stages of their lives. Even I remember myself when I first began to learn how to read the Quran quite late. I was probably 23, 22. And then comes a stage, you look at the Quran through the lens of whichever group you're working with, like an ideological lens. You then, if you start studying Sharia, you may then start looking into the Quran from purely like Ayatul Ahkam or Sharia, you know, as a book of law. But I think even after that, you then go back to what the Quran says about itself. It is a book of guidance, like Hudal lin-nas, Hudal lil-muttaqin. So it's a book of guidance, and guidance must be intelligible to everybody, to all Muslims. It's addressed to all Muslims. So I think people need to say it's a long journey, but there's things they can understand immediately. And like Imam Suhaib said, it's not rocket science. Most of the verses is about guidance, is about reminding you of things that you already know. You do know how to be good to your neighbor. You do know what's right and wrong. It's reminders. And the other thing is, it's about, the Quran is about getting you to adopt values, right? Ethical values. It's not about the legal system. It's not about just the fiqh. The Quran, if you see, less than 10% of the ayats are to do with ahkam, right? Why? Because the Quran pushes values, taqwa, sabr, you know, generosity, you know, high moral character. That's what the Quran's about, and that's accessible to everybody.
Brothers and sisters, we have Imam Suhaib Webb with us today for this show. So if you have any questions for Imam Suhaib Webb, our primary theme is the Quran, but we're taking general questions as well. We already have a few questions that have come through, which we'll be asking the Imam shortly. But a few more questions around this idea of accessing the Quran and engaging with the Quran in this blessed month of Ramadan. I think the advice and guidance that you've all given makes the Quran accessible to everyone. But are we then discouraging people to go deeper into the understanding of the Quran by studying Arabic, or are we saying actually now with all the translations that are available, you can access the Quran and have almost, you know, same level of contemplation and depth without necessarily studying too much Arabic? Where would you guide people around that? Because that's always a question that people say, can I really have khushu in prayer if I don't understand the Arabic language? Can I really understand the Quran? Can I really build that relationship with the Quran if I don't know Arabic? Your guidance on this, maybe Imam Suhaib Webb first, and then I'll ask Shaykh Shafi.
The best answer is the answer of Sayyidina Imam Shafi, the other Imam Shafi. This is Shafi and Shafi. That a Muslim should learn as much Arabic as needed to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And to have a passion. You know, so we would encourage somebody to learn what they need to learn. But learning Arabic, and this I think is a mistake in the pedagogy of the Muslim community, maybe 20 years ago or so, is that we ask the masses to become ulama. We ask the masses to go and like study as though this is going to be their career. Whereas someone could learn like basic vocabulary, right? They have now in translations of Quran with the English and the Arabic next to it, and they even have the words underneath it. You know, you could learn those words. It's like right? You what's called vocabulary acquisition, so that when you go into prayer, you're understanding what you're saying, right? Would someone have the same level of critical reflection that they would have if they understood Arabic? No, because even with the Arabic, there's depth, right? What's called fiqh al-lugha. So someone who knows Arabic, knows rhetoric, knows all the roots of the word, knows the poetry, knows, you know, all of those things, their reflection is going to be much more deeper. But guidance is from Allah. Abu Lahab, he was at the height of fasaha. You know, Abu Lahab, he was fasih. He was very eloquent. وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. But it didn't guide him, right? We should remember guidance is from Allah. So if a person's thinking about like a deep scholarly reflection, of course, academically, then one of the requirements would be that you need Arabic. If someone's thinking about a reflection that can touch their heart and transform their life, that's fine. It can be done in their own language, right? And a point to what we were talking about earlier too, is that when we tell people, yeah, go read, you'll find the answer in tafsir. Oftentimes people find things in the books of tafsir that are absolutely like difficult for them to stomach. And Dr. Muhammad Musa from Al-Azhar, he did his PhD in Surah Nisa, mashallah. He just said a few nights ago in the lecture I was listening to that every mufassir had his or her own cultural parameters, their own social optics that influenced how they interpreted the Quran. So it's also important that we tell people tafsir is not something yuha, like revealed from God. Tafsir is the critical reflection of a person, and there may be things correct and there may be things incorrect. So again, if the person comes across something that they don't, because now we're in this call-out culture. You know, yesterday someone, I mentioned Imam Ibn al-Qayyim in a tafsir of Surah Hujurat for ELM, and someone told me, I don't like Ibn al-Qayyim. I said, well, when you go to the restaurant, if they have a dish you don't like nahari, do you leave? Or do you stay and order something else? So then why are Muslims like this with one another? So I may come across, sorry to take it too far off topic, but someone may come across something in a tafsir and they're like, oh, Imam Tabari said this, I'm done with Imam Tabari. That's ridiculous. Imam Tabari's a person. He's not going to agree with everything you agree with. So the second point I think to this also is that in engaging the scholarly reservoirs of scholarly tradition in the sciences of tafsir and Quran, it's okay also to not agree with things and look at it as a process and engage and ask questions and not cancel what we call cancel culture. Cancel culture is not something good, man.
Absolutely. Any reflection from you, Shaykh Shafiur, on this in terms of Arabic and the need for that for Quran?
I would say for people in the West especially, only because of the facilities and institutes that are now available, maybe not 20 years ago, but now you've got such a wide availability of institutes teaching Arabic, basic Arabic and things, not to become a scholar, but people in the West, if you're serious about understanding the Quran, reflecting on the Quran, I totally agree. It can be done in English with translation. I remember my son when he first read English translation of the Quran. Prior to that, he was just like reading and memorizing Quran, parts of it in Arabic. But when he read the English, he was like, oh, Dad, I had no idea of the contents of the Quran. It's just amazing. So through the English, you can get that kind of hit, if you like. You can get that understanding, motivation, reflection, without a doubt. But it's at a level. If you want to move to the next level, and I think people in the West have the time and the money mostly to be able to afford to do that. Not learning Arabic to become a scholar, but learning Arabic to that extent where it allows you to ponder over the Quran a bit more, just get the feel and the taste of the Quran. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's very important point for our audience, because often we limit ourselves in terms of how we engage with the Quran simply because we don't know Arabic. And of course, most of the Muslims in the West don't know Arabic. There are increasing number of students of Islamic Sharia who are learning Arabic, but most don't. And they tend to limit themselves to just recitation of the Quran. So that's actually very important advice and guidance from both our guests here in terms of actually being able to engage in a much more deeper and meaningful way with the Quran, even though you may not have the Arabic language. We have a question here. Sorry, Imam Suhaib, did you want to come in?
And we should also create a pedagogy for this, right? Where it's organized. So again, we tell people, you study Arabic, you become a scholar. No. Study Arabic to become literate, to become like functional, have a functional relationship with Quran. How do you have a functional relationship with Quran? Is Quranic literacy. So like at our school, Swiss, people ask like, if I go to Swiss, am I going to become a scholar? No, you'll become literate. You'll become functional. Like people go to the gym, they want to be like muscle bound freaks, right? No, you just want to have good fitness, functional fitness. So we should think about like Arabic as a key to my functionality, not as I want to be a scholar. Most of the great scholars, and Shaykh Shafiur probably has the same experience I met in my life, they never wanted to be scholars. They just loved it. Like they just wanted to practice. It wasn't this like, I want to study, I want to become this person.
Yeah.
It was, I want to function, like I want to live, not a theoretical, because when I posit this as I'm going to become a scholar, it becomes very theoretical. But what we want is practicality. Qumi layla ila qalila. Okay, how many people pray tahajjud? It's right in the Quran. Alladhina la yashhaduna zur. How many of us were watching bad stuff on TV? It's right in the Quran. So the practicality component of the Quran, I think, has to be set as the ultimate goal of the curriculum. And scholarship is the sugar on the dessert. Like if it happens, it happens. Or in the tea. Sorry to interrupt.
That's really interesting. When I was looking at your website, Swiss, and you say your target is to provide people with functional literacy. And I think that's exactly the point that you're making there. Imam Suhaib, the question here for you in terms of memorization of the Quran. You memorize the Quran. Traditionally, memorization of the Quran is seen as something that is started at a very early age. And if you don't complete the Quran by 12, 14, then it becomes almost impossible. But alhamdulillah, you managed to memorize the entire Quran at a much later age. Any tips, any guidance on how people can go about doing that?
Yeah, Uthman ibn Affan was 36 years old when he memorized the Quran. And again, sometimes the constructions, the religious constructions found in the Muslim community are antithetical to the religion. So for example, religious studies is for kids. Kids don't lead the world. Like no disrespect, like my 10-month-old daughter is not right now going out and like paying bills. Who leads the world? The grown folks. So why would we think that suddenly, I'm older, so now I'm emancipated from religious studies? And also that means in my mind that religious studies is a child's endeavor. Like really? That's incredible. That's really problematic. Nobody says that about becoming a doctor. If you didn't become a doctor before you're 10, it's just done. If you didn't get into LSE before, what is it? London School of Economics, LCE. If you didn't get into LSE before you're 20, just forget it. Oh, you didn't get into Oxford before you're 14, life's over. Nobody says that. Why do we say that about a science that we need throughout all of our life? Like religion is something that we need when we're young, when we're in middle ages, and when we get older, right? So I don't think it matters how old you are. Then people always ask me like, but what if it takes me like years to memorize? Alhamdulillah, imagine when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you can say, I spent like 6 years of my life memorizing the Quran. MashaAllah, right? Like, it's not an issue. I memorized the Quran in my 20s. I started when I was 20. I finished in 2 years. So I think like, but I also went too fast, because when you go too fast, then you have to review for 4 years. It's a joke. Like if you finish in 1 year, you review for 5 years. If you finish in 2 years, you review for 4 years. What we were taught is a page a day. That's when we were like in college and had no bills, no kids, no family. but I recommend for like people, do what you can. Like, I'm very open to this. My teacher taught me whatever a person finds easy, maybe it's 5 verses. In Azhar, they say, man hafidha khamsa lan yansaha, right? Who memorizes 5 verses and masters them will never forget them. So at a minimum, depending on the size of the verses, 3 to 5 verses, you know, every day or two. If you're an adult, because you're busy, you got a lot going on. So each day you do 3 or 5 verses, you can read them. The next day you pray with them, you walk to work with them, you know, you live your life with those verses, and then move on to 5 more and 5 more and 5 more and 5 more and 5 more. The advantage of being older also is that you're able to organize your studies better. Oftentimes young people, they're not able to organize their thoughts. So at an older age, you can create kind of a system, if you will. So like I tell people, once when I was in Egypt, subhanAllah, I remember I came back to America, this man who was in his 80s, Iqbal Butt from Pakistan. And he's like, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. We talked to you. So yeah, he said, do you think I can go to Marcus Diwan? You think I can go study Arabic? He's 81 years old, man.
Wow.
I said, absolutely. MashaAllah. Oh, what do you want to tell him, to go home and just have dementia? You know, I say, hey man, go to Egypt and study. So it's not about age, it's about passion. And then being organized. And I tell people 3 to 5 verses a day. If you're a family person, if you're a professional or in the workforce and you're single, you could do more because you have more time. But someone with children and a wife or a husband, you know, that's. I remember one time I met a sister in England. She memorized the Quran, mashallah. And she told me she used to, while she was cooking, she was a homemaker, she would put the Quran in front of the pot on the window, and that's how she memorized the Quran. So she would be doing like the work in the kitchen, and the Quran, the big Quran would be there, and that's how she memorized. MashaAllah. So that's passion, you know, not necessarily talent.
Yeah. Passion with consistency, I think, is what will get you there.
In an organized plan, right? 3 to 5 verses every 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
You know, and just keep going at it.
And what's been your experience, Shaykh Shafi? You said you started a bit late as well, in your 20s, early 20s.
No, I didn't start memorizing, but I think, look, even the Prophet ﷺ revelation came at 40. The Sahaba were around that age or younger as well. Imam Abu Hanifa, he started specializing in fiqh very late in his age, right? At least after 25 years of age. Izzuddin Abdul Salam started very late. There's many scholars who start late, and what is late and early? These are very subjective things.
Yeah.
But I think it's never too late. Where I teach at As-Salam Institute, every year in different classes, there's at least 1 or 2 people over the age of 60 studying like foundation Sharia sciences, traveling from other cities to come to London to study. So I think age is not a factor, it's just a number, as they say. I'm quite lazy when it comes to memorizing. I feel, not because of my age, I feel I can, but I'm just not consistent and disciplined enough. But I wish I was. But it's open. You can memorize. The other thing about memorization, they say you retain things in your memory, that which you focus on and love, right? If you pay attention to it, you're motivated to memorize. So at an older age, usually you do it out of your own motivation. You're not forced to do it. So hopefully that should stick. It's never too late. Lots of people memorize when they're older.
Even at Azhar, I remember the first year in college, I went into the Qa'ah, the big area where for the classes and stuff. And there was guys in their 50s and 60s from Singapore, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you here? I was like, are you here with your kids? They're like, oh man, we're students. Like, we came to study. And I was like, subhanAllah, how amazing. You know?
Yeah.
And they worked hard and graduated, and mashallah.
MashaAllah. So all the brothers and sisters who are listening, you know, Ramadan is a good time for us to make that start, but don't allow the end of Ramadan be the end of our journey with the Quran and engagement with the Quran. It's an ongoing process, and if we have the passion, as Imam Suhaib was saying, have our studies organized and have consistency, then inshallah we can move forward, and by the time next Ramadan comes, we'll be in a better position than this Ramadan, inshallah. Some brothers and sisters, if you have any questions, please do post your questions in the comment section, or and it will be passed on to us, and we'll be able to take those questions. It can be on topics wider than the theme of the Quran, which is the initial introductory conversation that we've been having with Imam Suhaib and Shaykh Shafi. There's a couple of questions that have come, and I just want to take a couple of those. First of all, it's a topic to do with da'wah, and we know both Shaykh Shafi as well as Imam Suhaib have been involved in the field of da'wah for over 2 decades. So this one specifically to Imam Suhaib first, in terms of your strategies and approach you're using to bring marginalized Muslims in the US closer to Islam. How can we use the teaching of the Quran to change the mindset of our institutions here so that they don't ostracize individuals that might be struggling with their deen? So rather than shunning them completely, how do we try and open the doors and bring them back in before they take the extreme position and leave Islam completely, which we see is a real reality, unfortunately, within our community, where some people are really struggling with their faith?
I mean, it's Surah Al-Fatih, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes that our community is not monolithic. It says, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Allah says that we have passed on the book to our servants. Some of them are sinners, some of them are in the middle, some of them are at the forefront, right, in their khayr. So the Muslims, that's who we are. And Imam al-Tahawi, in his famous Aqidah, he says, al-mu'minun kulluhum awliya'ur rahman. All of the believers are awliya of ar-Rahman in different stations based on their ta'atul Quran. So first of all, we need to embrace these people as being generally Muslims, and we need to engage them in ways maybe between targhib and tarhib, right? Like some people need motivation, some people need agitation. You have to understand them before you can engage that. And then at the same time, and I think this is where institutions become concerned, is this is not a free-for-all, right? This is not like heathenry. To be a Muslim means to adhere to a certain set of principles, values, morals, and beliefs. And not everybody's at that point, but we want to keep that point in front of us, because I've seen some in dawah, they don't have any dawabit, is the word I'm looking for, right? They don't have any foundation. So people feel like I'm just coming in, I can maintain my lifestyle, or I can maintain some of the unhealthy acts that I'm engaged in. Absolutely not. Islam is, I like to tell people, Islam is really about achieving the ultimate you, right? Through Islam, you can really become a righteous person and then also a successful person, inshallah. So I think it's unfair, especially with people who become Muslim, where they become Muslim without really understanding what this really is. Like, we always have to buffer and insulate people's understanding with, listen, there are certain foundational beliefs and practices which are non-negotiable in Islam. It's okay that you struggle with that and you work towards that, but we're not going to forego those foundations for anybody. That's not our business. That's the business of Allah. And I think those honest conversations are more meaningful to people than either becoming overly harsh and pushing them out, or overly laxed, and then later on they discover that, oh, I was supposed to do these things and you never told me. Right? There has to be وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. The ending is Allah. And if we really love people, if we really care for people, we're not going to hide from them what Islam is asking them to do, but we're going to think strategically and deeply about how we build and help facilitate their engagement with those foundations. I don't see that happening a lot of times. It's very, either very harsh, people don't feel welcome, or it's the opposite. It's extremely laxed. There needs to be what we call a vital center, right? So that has to be done by understanding the person, knowing who that person is, being willing to serve that person. I like to tell people, work with Muslims. If it's really work, it requires sacrifice. So I know, for example, I know a major speaker in America and in the world who has no problems going to the projects and visiting the converts' parents. That's real work. Has no, Dr. Mozammal Siddiqui, mashallah, in LA. One time, he's now almost 80, I think, years old. And I met somebody who was in the hospital in LA. And they said, yeah, there was this old man. He had this big white beard, and he came and visited me every week in my hospital room. It was Dr. Mozammal Siddiqui, who's the head of the Fiqh Council, is on the Majma' Fiqhi in Mecca, which was now destroyed. But like, what I'm trying to say is, like, the worker that's doing this has to sacrifice also. Like, that has to be a passion. It's not just tell people, fear Allah, be a good Muslim, and then, you know, get upset when they don't listen to you. So understanding the person, understanding that you have to sacrifice, and then what I said earlier, or appreciating the parameters of Islam. And then hikmah. You know, how do you present? If I give you a plate of biryani at iftar and I shove it in your face, one of my teachers used to tell me, you know, if I bring biryani to you at iftar and I shove it in your face and make you eat it, you're not gonna want to eat biryani. But if I put it, like, make the rice orange, you know, whatever, some flowers, and yeah, then you're gonna want to.
You have us to go before iftar, Sheikh. So
that's okay. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yeah, mashallah. I think, you know, it's really interesting you make the point. What would be your advice to some of these institutions and dawah organizations, the community organizations who are now seeing increasing number of young people who are coming, who are really struggling with their faith? So they're not denying any of the thawabit, any of the kind of fundamentals of Islam. They're not saying these are not, you know, part of Islam, but really struggling to implement those in their lives or really embrace them. What space should these institutions, organizations provide for them within the Muslim community? It's almost unless you meet certain criteria of religiosity, you have to be outside of the wall, outside the door, and once you meet those criteria, then you're welcome to come in. What's your?
It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of patience to be in dawah is to be abused, right? It's just part of. You know, as Waraqa ibn Nawfal said to the Prophet, Ya laytani kuntu, like, I wish I was young. Because your people, they're going to kick you out. Like, to be involved in dawah is to be slandered, is to be ripped to pieces, is to be hurt by people you love. To be a da'iyah is to be hurt by your lover. Like, that's truly what it is in many ways. And you have to be very patient. So I'll give you an example. In a community that I used to live in, it wasn't in Boston. This lady, she used to come with no hijab and nothing, man. And she told me, I'm a feminist, and feminism, right? I said, wow, I'm just from Oklahoma. I'm a very simple person. I told her, me, I'm just Azhari, you know, I don't know, this you know, theorist and so on. She said, I'm going to pray, but I'm going to pray without hijab, and I'm going to pray in the front. By myself, I'm not going to pray in jama'ah. I said, I didn't respond to her. So she used to come for the first few months and go and pray by herself in the front. I know nobody can expect this, right? But after, mashallah, like, she attended halaqat and she listened and she started asking questions. Now, alhamdulillah, she's, you know, wearing appropriate attire and she prays in the proper place. I could have thrown her out. Right? And people attack me for this. But I believe in the power of Allah to change people, because I experienced that in my own life. So sometimes people want to rush Allah's guidance. Allah's guidance is His business. Our job, as the Prophet said, muyassir, is to facilitate without violating. In a large mosque, that wouldn't have been possible, by the way. I know. It was a small, like, zawiyah. So I know it's like, it's not gonna, no one's gonna, because if it was in a huge mosque, of course, there's gonna be a bigger harm perhaps happen, because people are gonna fight and she's gonna get yelled at and she's gonna yell back. This was a very small musalla. I said, Khaliha tusalli. She used to pray by herself for like the first few months, and then she would come and listen to the lectures. And then she started asking questions. And I started answering her questions. And then she met some other teachers. And now, alhamdulillah, she told me, I feel so stupid. I said, it's okay. We could have thrown her out, bro.
Absolutely.
Well,
and I think
so we have to be patient with people, but not, again, the reason I made that call, it's a very small musalla. It's not like masjid where there's going to be a fight, which makes you have to protect the congregants of the masjid first. But you have to be patient with people. And you, when you're talking about dealing with this new generation, number one is any masjid that's very serious is going to have a paid person who engages social media. Majority of young Muslims in East London, I guarantee you, are more of them are on Instagram than at the masjid. More of them are on TikTok than the masjid. On Snapchat than the masjid. The masjid doesn't have to say to itself, we failed. You haven't failed. That's every church, every synagogue, every college. This is the problem, right? But can you bring in not just a youth worker or youth director who's on the ground? That's important. Intake, you got to have an intake person. But even on social media, is there a presence in a way that is like we see our mashaykh? Like look at like Sheikh Hasib Noor, look at Yasmin Mugahid, look at Omar Suleiman doing his series on Al-Malaika. They're engaging these places. So when I talk about engagement, say ELM, for example, or Inspire, what you guys are doing it, right? Faith Inspire. There should be a way of thinking, okay, I'm online, I'm on someone's phone. They reach out to me. Are there resources that I can redirect them to at an intake level? Because we don't want those people also going to like the Aqidah Tahawiyah class, because the people in Aqidah Tahawiyah have worked hard, have struggled and dealt with a lot of things that person has still to deal with. We need to have specialized type of curriculum that addresses these kind of people. Not because they're bad, because it's the best way to serve them. And at the same time, we preserve those people that have already gone through that. They don't necessarily want to go back and deal with that again. They want to continue to grow. So this again is a pedagogy. Intake. Who deals with the gangster kids? You got a specialist, they deal with the gangster guy. Who deals with people that used to sell drugs? We got a person, they know how to deal with people who used to sell drugs. Who deals with, young women issues? That's how there should be, like, this is ministry, right? We don't like to use that word associated with Christianity, but it's like a ministry, right? How do you intake this type of element? And then you have a process that allows them to grow while preserving the integrity and foundations of the broader community. So like that's where these young guys, and then you have someone online, an online presence that's saying, hey, we're Faith Inspire. Here are the services we offer for young people. You've engaged, you've got some powerful social media things out there. And in many ways, it's an uphill battle. I mean, we're dealing with the glitz of dunya. I mean, at the end of the day, look at what people are being bombarded with. Like every day, the imagery of dunya is really amplifying this temporary life as the permanent abode of happiness and minimizing the akhirah and its place. We have to come back and nukabbir al-akhirah wa nusaghir al-dunya. Right? We want to remind people of al-akhirah. So I think this requires a lot of work, and it has to be strategic. It involves marketing, right? And then a pedagogy, and then you have like Shafiur can talk about, like in certain situations you want to partner with mental health and psychological people, psychiatrists, people that can deal with mental health issues, family therapy. A lot has to go into this.
Yeah. Shafiur, your reflections on this, particularly within the British context, the UK context?
No, I think it's even more important in the UK because traditionally our communities, the way we've been brought up, the way the masajids have been set up, the type of people who have been active, like in the dawah scene around masjids and institutes, what you can describe as conservative, right? Both in appearance, in outlook, in understanding. And that's always been a problem when it comes to youth and having access and feeling that openness to actually access places where religion is taught, or at least where religious questions are answered or even entertained. So I think in the UK, we've got to work doubly hard. I don't think the masajids are still there yet. There's good practices here and there, but there needs to be a revolution in opening up our spaces and making people feel welcome without having to become like muttaqi number one to enter it through the doors. And I always recall the example of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who himself is described as a mercy for the world, right? That was his approach. And where the drunk, the person who was constantly having a problem with an addiction, drinking, right? And he was brought in front of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and some people were cursing him. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, don't curse him, for he loves Allah and his messenger. I mean, that is the approach we have to take, that these young people, if they are approaching us or approaching the masjid or an institution, they're doing that out of love. I get surprised sometimes on social media from the appearance. You think these people have nothing to do with the deen. But you look at the comments they're making, this Ramadan, I want to understand the Quran. And you look at the appearance and you think, because you become judgmental, you think these people are so far away from the deen. But no, even if they're not wearing hijab, even if the young boys are on different social media platforms, doing lots of different things, they have a basic love for Islam. And that's why they want to come and learn or ask questions. And I think we have to have that, we have to revolutionize our spaces in terms of, it's like businesses, customer service. It's like, we've got to make it comfortable for the people who are coming in. We've got to make it so that it's open. People don't feel scared or pressured. They don't feel like they're discriminated or looked down upon. And that's usually what happens in a lot of places. But yeah, there's work to be done.
How do you create, sorry, Junaid.
Yeah, carry on.
How do you create an understanding, say, amongst, because I have a concern also sometimes, and you didn't say this, but the conservative Muslim is also an integral part of our community. They keep us honest.
Without a doubt, I agree. Without a doubt.
So how do you then educate the conservative Muslim and say, look, man, these people may be coming through the community, and you're gonna feel a little insecure and angry, but can you not react? Like, how do you do that? That seems to be, and then on the other end, we need to tell people that are coming in and may not be as conservative, you just don't cancel these guys because they say something you don't agree with.
Yeah.
It's like this dual kind of impatience. How do you suggest engaging the more conservative elements to get what we call community buy-in? We're working for a transformative approach with these people that are going to come in, and you may see things you don't agree with. Like, how do you do that? I haven't figured it out.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's through experience. Like, I know an imam who's quite conservative, many years been working in the community, but it's through experience he's now changed his outlook because of the cases that have come to him, again and again. He's been forced, if you like, to change his outlook. And also, I think speakers like Mufti Menk, Tariq Jamil in Pakistan, who visually you might think these are very conservative people. But Tariq Jamil, I mean, he speaks mainly in Urdu. I don't know if you know him, Imam Suhaib. He's wonderful. I mean, the accessibility people feel through these speakers, they just feel. There was a presenter asking him questions, and she said, in Pakistan, most people, imams and maulanas, put the fear of God into people. But you're the first imam that I actually, regardless of my background, I began to love Allah. Like, this is a presenter on national TV saying, you're the first imam that I've listened to that has shown me that Allah is compassionate, He's merciful, He loves me. So, I think those are good examples, but it's a struggle.
So go back to what Imam Suhaib was saying earlier on. It requires a mindset shift. from being judgmental to one where you're almost being at the service of others and welcoming people. And I think that's what we often don't see enough amongst the leadership or imams and scholars. We're starting to see more, but not enough, where actually it's almost welcoming and making people feel at home, opening the doors, allowing people to be comfortable first within their current context, and then working and advising and guiding, rather than taking the other approach where, no, I'm going to be judgmental, I'm going to be giving you the advice, you take these advice first and then you come in. So how do we almost create this mindset shift amongst people and institutions?
I think you have to create a culture. It's like a company. You create a culture and you have really meaningful conversations with people. You reflect on the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is really invested in transformation, and kind of remind, Allah said to the Sahaba, كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. You used to be like these people, right? Like, don't forget, this is where you used to be. And then Allah blessed you. So maybe reminding these people, أَحْسِنُوا كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكُمْ. You now have an opportunity to share this passion and love that you have for Islam with these people that can ultimately perhaps lead to transformative results.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the. I don't know about England. I haven't been to England in a few years, but
let us know when you want to come, Sheikh.
After
the lockdown, inshallah.
Do we frame the role of da'wah in institutions, even in America, seems to be lost?
Yeah.
Right. The idea of da'wah.
Definitely. It's like such a 90s thing, isn't it? When you look at it now, da'wah. I think a couple of things have happened. One is you've got this huge social justice movement, if you like. A lot of Muslims coming into the deen off the back of identity politics, discrimination, Islamophobia, and other things. So you have people perhaps on the platform of the deen. Yes, they want solutions through the deen, but it's more about the left politics. It's more about fighting Islamophobia or social justice, if you like. So that's quite a large section of the people. You've got others who are just purely into educational entertainment, if you like, attending big conferences, attending courses, attending talks, but not doing anything afterwards. It's just attendance, being motivated, etc. Not everybody, of course, people do benefit, they are transformed. But that idea of my responsibility of da'wah, of changing myself and then changing others, that responsibility and sacrifice seems to be not the operating mode of a lot of groups or speakers or individuals.
And we need more of that. If just looking at some of the comments that have come in, Isabella Hanifa is saying that she absolutely agrees to what's been said. There is no masajid list in London that provides access for youth. Their needs are not met. So that's a worrying thing when someone is saying there is no masajid in London that is accessible to youth. I think what they mean is not just like doors are open, young people can come in, but in terms of the resource, the facilities, the service that is there, welcoming environment there, dealing with their issues and concerns, that's probably not been met to the level that is required.
Looking at the resources of masjids in terms of the people running the masjids, the management committee, the type of backgrounds they come from, and things like that, with the exception of a few perhaps, I think it's a tough ask to ask those people. I remember when I used to work in the drug treatment field, and we wanted to just hand out leaflets after Jummah about drug treatment, support for people who are using drugs. And masjids wouldn't allow us to do that because it was such a taboo topic. So it is, and I think young people as well, they need to be involved. They need to get onto the masjid boards in their local mosque, get involved, serve, etc. Otherwise, this change is not going to come.
Bigger discussion and another challenge within our community in terms of mosque management. We can maybe cover another day. We've got Shamsuddin, who's saying a lot of mosques can learn from what Imam Suhaib Webb has just said. Lily Chai is saying that you have to be a certain type of youth or have a certain look for you to enter the masjid. Khalid Rahman is saying there are over 40 masajid in this part of town of London. We need more English khutbahs on Friday. I think there's an increasing number of khutbahs.
That's a tough one.
More English khutbahs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lily Chai is saying try not being a hijabi and want to go into a mosque. So you know, these are real issues, real concerns by within our community. So in the month of Ramadan, when alhamdulillah more brothers and sisters, the Muslim community is trying to re-engage with the Quran, re-engage with their faith, re-engage with the masajid. Of course now they're closed, but generally re-engage with the faith. It's really disheartening to hear many people feel that they can't access the mosque, they can't relate to the mosque in the current state, in their level of iman, their level of religiosity that they're in at the moment. So I think some quick points on that, Imam Suhaib.
I mean, can you imagine this poor sister, right? May Allah bless her, what she's saying. Like, it's already intimidating to be young and just go to a mosque. I mean, I experienced that as a non-Muslim. It's perhaps one of the most, just because of your own insecurities, not because of necessarily what anything the mosque has done, but just like to walk into a religious space, it's like extremely uncomfortable. And then to be immediately met with opposition. You know, doesn't the Prophet say if someone takes one step to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes 10 steps to them? If somebody, it's Hadith Qudsi, somebody walks to me, I run to them. We have young people like this woman walking into the mosque and we push them 10 steps back. And that is where the deeper ethos of the institution is. Are you operating as a prophetic community or a cultural club? Are you operating as a prophetic community or as a certain jama'ah that adheres to a certain ideology whose purpose is to defend this tariqah, minhaj, or whatever? That's the problem. A prophetic community will have no problem with this woman walking in with no hijab. Right? As long as she's not going on the minbar and saying, I don't believe hijab is fard. She's not saying that. She has her own set of, I know women who don't wear hijab because their parents won't let them wear hijab. I know women who don't wear hijab because they struggle with the idea of hijab, but they still pray. So when are we going to start to talk about a prophetic community? Not a cultural community, not an ethnic community, not a convert community. No, a prophetic community. What does it mean to be a prophetic community? And then how do we evaluate Allah says, you know, Sirajan Munira, the Prophet is a torch. Al-Razi said, because the torch traditionally is a light it's passed on to other tribes. So every Muslim is a torchbearer of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how do we then understand that we have a set of foundations that are non-negotiables, but then are smart enough to understand that not everybody has reached those non-negotiables? Like, isn't that the sign of really a successful endeavor? That I'm so comfortable with what I believe that people that orbit around that space will either choose to say, you know what, I don't agree, and go, or get better. You know, like, that is, I think, the issue here. And I don't know in the US, especially after 9/11, the shift of the masjids to wanting to make white people happy, right? Wanting to be close to power is perhaps more prevalent than being a prophetic community. Dawah. And then we forgot, like, you talk to young Muslims, man, it's not easy being Muslim in the West. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not easy. Like in New York City reminds me a lot of the UK, right? I mean, the amount of facade that you could get involved in New York City, man. And nobody at the weed or the trap house, or they're not like, you don't have hijab on. The bar is not like, you don't have hijab on. You know what I mean? They're like, come on in. Satan is a good guy.
Yeah.
Just come on in, man. It's all good. You could go to the bar with a thobe and a kufi on. No one would stop you. Right? They wouldn't say anything to you. So we really need to get back into being a prophetic community that understands we are meant to help each other reach our potential in our relationship with God, and to facilitate that process while maintaining firmly, but with kindness, a set of non-negotiables. Yeah, it's very important.
I think it's really important to get the masajids, or not just masajids, but the leaders, the imams. We have to understand that.
So just a couple
we've got
minutes.
1 minute.
Just a couple of minutes. Yeah. So concluding.
Okay. Yeah. Very short. Very short.
Yeah.
I think it's about a lot of our imams that have been produced traditionally in madrasa, especially in the UK, looking at Islam from the golden age and the books of fiqh from that period when we were mighty and powerful, and that's a complicated legal system and everything. We have to understand and realize we are in decline. We are in the weakest point in our history. People have not been born into a practicing, fully understanding Islamic family. So we have to readjust the way we look at things. That's the key. And I think Imam Suhaib said it nicely, the prophetic community, prophetic approach, not the madhahibs in that sense, not the golden age of all of these rules and regulations that were developed in courts and things like that, but looking at people as human beings and welcoming them with open arms and understanding their reality and struggle.
On this point of creating a prophetic community, Salahuddin Ahmed is saying we need more imams on the front line, engaging with the community out of the masjid as well, engaging with the youth outside of the masjid. So on that, final points, Imam Suhaib, before we wrap up.
That's important. Why, even if we look at the Darul Ulooms or the Zaytunas or any of the kind of the colleges that have been established, right? Where is the creation of the public intellectual? Like there's, وَأَنذِرْ عَشْرَتِكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, right? The Prophet is posited as a public teacher. In Azhar, Shafi'a, we can say this, right? Great education for the most part, but you're not necessarily taught, unless you engage the shuyukh outside, right? You're not taught to think about being a public intellectual. You're taught to be scholar, kind of, somewhat eclectic maybe. Whereas these madrasas, right, these Darul Ulooms, religious colleges, they do a great job of creating a prototype sheikh. Great, we need that in the masjid. But who's going to create the public intellectual? Who's going to create the Malcolm, the Siraj Wahaj, the Aisha Adawiyah? People that can go in the streets, have knowledge of deen, and reach the people. That's considered even in some religious circles, like what? Like, I'm a scholar, I want to talk about qira'at, I want to talk about asanid, ijazat. So this is its own little ecosystem that can exist without having very little empathy or connection to the masses of people. So your question and what our brother mentioned in the comments is crucial.
Yeah.
And the community should demand this. If I'm going to put money into this, look at Maulana Tariq Jamil that Shafiur was talking about. Look at how just a slight change in approach has impacted Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right. So the public intellectual.
Yeah. And these are the names that you've mentioned, and other individuals like Imam Tariq Jamil and all the Imam Siraj al-Hajj and the others that you mentioned, and yourself, both Imam Shaykh Shafi and Imam Suhaib Webb. So I want to say Imam Suhaib Webb is a personification of a change maker. And this is exactly what we need, change makers in the community. And from Faith Inspire, that's one of the mission that we have, is to create change makers in society. So all the brothers and sisters who are listening and who have commented on this issue, come forward. We need all of you to come forward and be change makers in society, where we can make that contribution, inshallah, and take the message of Islam, not just keep it inside the mosque, but outside, so that we make our faith open to others and take that message out there in the community and make a positive change. Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Suhaib Webb, for joining us. So many more questions and areas of discussion. Maybe we can, have another opportunity in the future, inshallah, to carry on with that conversation. We thank you for your time. Jazakumullah khairan. Jazakumullah khair, Shaykh Shafi, as well. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and keep us in your prayers in this blessed month of Ramadan. Everyone, Jazakumullah khairan for tuning in. Until next week, stay safe and keep us in your prayers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.